Hello, my name is Sadia, and I hope you enjoy this free sample class. This combination is for advanced beginners or intermediate level students. It's called Sharp and Soft Flow. This combination is actually from a longer choreography. This is just one little sample for you, and I hope you check out the entire choreography later on. The music is called Shores of Byblos by Ihsahn Hoshan, and it's from his album called Mystery of the Rhythm. Please enjoy. Since this is a shorter class, make sure that you warm up on your own before we get started, and also be sure to cool down at the conclusion of this class. Let's go over some basic posture for belly dancing. Starting with our feet, you want to make sure they are inside the width of your hips. Weight should be evenly distributed from toes to heels and side to side. Especially make sure that you don't roll out onto the outsides of your feet. Your knees should always be slightly bent. Sometimes we'll bend more than other times, but you just want to make sure that you never completely lock out your knees. Always have a minimum of a micro bend in your knees. Next, you want to have your lower abdominal muscles engaged or slightly contracted, just to make sure that the hips are right underneath the rib cage. You don't have to be extreme about it and pull the tailbone under too much. You also don't want to have a big sway in your lower back. We're just trying to center up those hips underneath your ribs. And with the rib cage, think about lifting and expanding and creating space between your vertebrae, shoulders rolled back and pressed down, ears over your shoulders, shoulders over your hips, and hips over your ankles. A few general safety tips to consider while you're learning belly dance are to make sure that you don't ever twist your knees. You want to try to keep your knees in alignment with your toes, and your toes and your knees in alignment with your hips. So for example, if we're ever doing a figure eight, whether it's front to back or back to front, I like to allow the balls of my feet to move gently. This way it protects my knees so there's no twinging in there. Now, some people have more flexibility than others, so this may not be an issue. But just make sure that if something hurts, you don't do it. Or try to have a body awareness where you can modify movements immediately if you feel like you don't have enough flexibility quite yet. And remember, you will gain flexibility over time. Let's go over some of the technique in this sharp and soft flow combination. So the first movement that we're going to do is called a hip thrust. And you can see that my hip is swinging out over my weighted foot. So whenever I do this, I take a small step out to the side and I gently swing my hip over my foot. Now in this combination, we're going to make a double hip accent. And you want to think about it like a stair step. So instead of doing two big ones, I'm going to go halfway all the way and bring it back. Halfway all the way. Try it on the left. Halfway all the way. Halfway all the way. Our next movement is a reverse figure eight. So you are twisting the hips from front to back, and the hips are in a horizontal plane, parallel with the floor. So remember, if you have any tightness in your knees, you can allow the balls of your feet to gently rotate. And we don't want to bend too much into this move. This is a little bit different. You can see the hips are tilting up and down when I bend too much. So my knees are bent slightly, but not too much. That way my hips stay in this plane right here. So we're going to do one reverse figure eight on your left hip, and we're going to make a quarter turn with it, like this. You can see how I start the weight transfer first, then the hip, and then finally complete the weight transfer with a little push into a turn. Try it on the right side. Quarter turn, shift back, prepare, quarter turn, quarter turn. Our next movement is a rib cage circle. And with this movement, you want to keep your head and your hips still and just move the ribs around. Now, this movement is not quite parallel with the floor. It's a little bit on a diagonal, so you're going to lift the rib cage when it comes across the front. Whenever we do this movement broken down, you can think of it as a diamond shape. Slide the ribs to the right, lift them up, slide them to the left, and drop back down to neutral. Right, up, left, back, right, up, left, back. Then smooth out the edges and circle it around. Now you can change directions. Slide left, lift straight up, slide right, and relax back. Left, up, right, back, left, up, right, back. Smooth out the edges, lift across the front. So this is your rib cage or chest circle. Our next movement in this combination is a reverse undulation, also called a camel or a body wave. And it looks like this. You can see the movement starts at my hips and rolls up to my rib cage. I bend my knees. I'm going to tuck my pelvis up in the front. I'm going to gently push my hips forward, push my waist forward, and then finally lift my chest. Bend, tuck, push, lift, bend, tuck, push, lift. Make sure that you don't roll up onto the balls of your feet, and make sure that you don't pull the hips back at the end of the movement. The last part of the movement should be the rib cage lift. Our next move is a small hip circle. We also call it an ulmi in belly dancing. And this is similar to the chest circle in the sense that you can break it down thinking of a diamond shape. Bump your hips to the right, to the front, to the left, and to the back. When you go to the back, be aware that you don't hyperextend your lower back too much and lift your tailbone up. You just want to think of it as more of a relaxing in the back. Right, front, left, sit. Right, front, left, sit. Just like the ribcage circle, we're going to smooth out the edges. Right, front, left, sit. Right, front, left, sit. Circle those hips around. Change the direction. Left, front, right, sit. Left, front, right, sit. Circle it around. And our last movement to go over is a hair toss. Now, this movement starts with a gentle collapsing. So you start by bending your knees, you pull your hips back, your chest drops over, then your head. Now, when you come up, you're going to come up with a flat back and flip that hair straight back. So think of it as rolling down and then flipping that hair back, but be gentle with it. It's really more about your whole body engaging the movement than just your neck. Collapse and bring it up. Now let's put these moves together. Okay, this combination has a right and a left side. We're going to learn the right side first, and then we'll reverse everything and do it on the left. So I'm going to teach this to you just facing the front for now, but keep in mind that it has 4 parts, and we're going to end up doing it in sort of a box shape. So starting with the beginning, we are going to do that double hip thrust on the right side. The count will be 1 and. Now you're going to do the reverse figure 8 on your left hip, and let's just move to the corner rather than all the way on the next side of the box. Drag that right leg in. Now we're going to do a reverse undulation, a reverse camel. Bend, tuck, push, lift. And then we're going to do 2 small counterclockwise chest circles. So they're going to lift across the front twice, and then you end on the front. So those counts will go, and 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7 and 8. So make sure on count 5, you are at the peak of your reverse camel. Count 6, you can pull the rib cage back in preparation to lift across the front on count 7 and end on count 8. So we're going to do this again, but instead of doing a rib cage circle, we're going to do that hip circle. And you'll notice I have 1 foot in a dig. That's what I call a dig, or 1.5 stance. So it's doing the same thing that we did in the technique section, except that I have 1 heel lifted and it makes it sort of on a slight diagonal. So when we add this to it, 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7 and 8. Now the third one is like the first one. 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7 and 8. And the fourth one is slightly different as well. Instead of doing any ribs or hip circle, this is where we incorporate the hair flip. 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7, 8. So let's add the arms to it. I do a gentle hand accent at the same time that I do my double hip thrust. 1 and. Notice the height of the hands. I don't want them to cover up what's happening here, so they're right below my rib cage. 1 and 2. Now both palms are going to push and mimic this figure 8 on that left hip. Then when I do my reverse undulation, my hands come up to my hair. I'm going to try to keep those elbows pulled back a little bit and keep my hands still and my head still and my hips still. So the only thing moving is my rib cage. So that's the first one. Next one, same thing here. 1 and 2, 3, 4. Now instead of going up to my hair, when I do my reverse camel, the hands are going to go down. So the opposite direction. Have a little bit of a plie on count 6. Prepare for that hip circle. 7, 8. Third one like the first one. 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 and 8. And then finally the fourth one. 1 and 2, 3, 4. Hands past the head, go up to a nice high V. You lift the chin, and then you collapse everything down. Head is last, and then come up and flick that hair back. So now we're going to try it in a box, but it's not a normal 4-sided box. It's going to have the front corners showcased. So I'm going to have the front corner, back center, and then the other front corner. So instead of being square on your sides of the box, you're slightly angled to the front. So when we put it together, it's going to look like this. 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 and 8. 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 and 8. 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 and 8. 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6 and 7, 8. Now let's try it on the left side. We do our double hip thrust on the left. 1 and 2, 3, 4. We're going to move to that front right corner. Reverse undulation. Now this time your rib cage goes clockwise. And 7, 8. 1 and 2. Straight to the back. 3, 4, 5, 6. Clockwise, hip circle. 7, 8. Hip thrust. 1 and 2. Other front corner. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last time hip thrust. 1 and 2. 3, 4 back to the front. 5, 6, 7, 8. And whether you're doing the right or the left side, whenever you do this hip thrust, you are square on the side of a box. So, for example, when I do the first half, which is starting with my right hip thrust, but I'm moving over my left shoulder, every time I do that, I'm bumping my hips square to one side of that box. I start with the side on stage right. Then I push my hip to the front. Then I bump my hip to stage left. And then I bump my hip to the back. And that brings me back around to the front. So it's the same thing on the left side, but opposite. Now let's practice this with music.